Corruption operates on untruth, manipulation, lack of spiritual connection, lack of love, lack of perspective, righteousness, denial, projection, fear, and attachment. Materialism. Lower chakra drives for higher power, for sex, money, laziness, gluttony, cronyism. The more you're run by your lower chakras, the more corrupt you are. Which brings us to another important point, which is, what is the relationship between spiral dynamics and corruption? The lower your stage on the spiral, by the way, if you don't know what that means, spiral dynamics, check out my multi-part series on spiral dynamics. The lower your spiral stage, the more corrupt you are. That's the rule of thumb. Why is this so? Because these stages correspond to levels of consciousness and moral and cognitive development, values development. And the higher one goes up these stages, the larger one's sense of self. The lower one is on these stages, the lower one's, the more limited and more contracted one's sense of self. So a person with a very contracted, limited sense of self cannot be conscious of their self-biases. And so, of course, they're going to be corrupt, and they're going to be very conformist in their thinking. They're going to be very, very ideological. And this ideology is one of the primary vectors for devilry. It's really when you get to tier 2, stages yellow and turquoise, that corruption gets eliminated. I mean, it can still exist in corners and pockets, but you really need to get to tier 2. Because remember, tier 1, spiral dynamics tier 1, which is stages blue, orange, green, and those three and some even lower ones, that is tier 1, and tier 1 is all about meeting your basic survival needs. And tier 2, that shift from green to yellow and above, that's when you're going beyond survival needs and you're getting into being needs. What Abraham Maslow called being needs. And it's only there that you're detached enough from your identity and from your own ideologies and from your own self-deceptions and thinking and distorted perspectives of the world and from your own personal needs for love and gratification and money and all that. You're detached enough to see your own self and your own worldview objectively, and therefore you're able to eradicate your own corruption. It's still difficult, but you're able to do it. Whereas really in tier 1, you're not able to do it. You're too self-involved. You're too scared and too worried about your own personal agenda to care about eliminating your own corruption. But you will make a show of demonizing other corrupt people. You will do that. That's a very convenient red herring, because every time you're judging other politicians on TV for being corrupt, that's a very good distraction from ever discovering your own corruptions. That's the lesser jihad. The biggest obstacle for third world, so-called third world and underdeveloped countries, like in Africa and South America, parts of Asia and so forth, Russia, Eastern Europe, their biggest obstacle is corruption. Those countries could be so much better if only everybody was willing to cooperate and not act like a selfish, barbaric animal and manipulate the whole system to their own advantage. Damn the collateral damage. But of course, they can't do that precisely because they're so stuck on survival. It's a dog-eat-dog world there in these third world countries. There's limited resources to go around. It's a real problem. It's not a fake problem. In certain countries that I was talking about, in Africa and elsewhere, in South America, they literally don't have enough food for the children. So of course it's going to be a dog-eat-dog situation, and it's going to be extremely corrupt because your life depends on it. That's my point. I'm not saying corruption is some frivolous thing that you can just easily wish away. I'm saying that the reason corruption has existed for 10,000 years and will probably continue to exist for another 10,000 years at least in human societies is because of how deeply wedded this is to your life. We're talking about life and death here. And the ideas and ideologies you hold are directly related to your ability to live and to meet your basic needs like food, shelter, sex, love, approval, companionship, friendship, all that stuff that a human needs or thinks he needs. That's what corruption is serving. So in these third world countries, vested interests are resisting development, slowing down the process. Slowing down the process of expanding love and consciousness. But they can't stop it entirely because the devil always loses in the long run. The devil could only slow down the process. So that's what's happening. Slowly, these countries are becoming less and less corrupt, but it takes generations for this to be noticeable. And of course, just because I'm explicitly pointing out third world countries here, I'm not by any means saying that first world countries like America or in Europe are not corrupt. We have plenty of corruption. I'll get to that in a minute. There's actually, I've posted on my blog in the past, a corruption index. There's websites that actually rank, a nonprofit, nonpartisan website that will rank the corruption of every single country in the world, and they track this over decades. They track what is happening. It's a score from 0 to 100. 0 means totally corrupt. You can barely live there. 100 means totally pure, no corruption at all. This includes the court systems, the political system, the police, the military, all this. So they rank this, and you see this map. It's a really illuminating map because this corruption index is one of the most important indices to track for a nation's development and growth, not the GDP. Corruption index. Because this corruption index directly correlates to the collective consciousness of that society. What you see is that countries that are below 50, these are not countries you want to live. These are very problematic countries with a lot of violence, a lot of selfishness. It's hard to do spirituality there. These countries are extremely dogmatic, very conformist. They all buy into some form of nationalism or some religion. These are devil countries, you might say. Of course, a lot of countries in the Middle East, a lot of countries in Africa are at this level, countries in South America and in parts of Asia and Eastern Europe as well. And then you have countries that are above 50. Those tend to be clustered in Europe. Some of the highest countries are in Northern Europe, the Scandinavian countries. Of course, America, Canada are pretty good. Mexico's pretty bad. From what I'm recalling this from memory. Japan is pretty good. Yeah, you can go find that on my blog. Maybe I'll link to it again. That's an illuminating map. And that map basically tells you the level of consciousness of every country in the world. And, one of the things that'll surprise you is America is not the top on that list, which shows you we have more work to do. This is really what politics is about. In my series on conscious politics, that 4-part series, long as hell, this is one of the core pillars of what conscious politics is. It's the raising of the consciousness and the identity of a collective society to reduce or to raise the consciousness index, the corruption index, to get it closer to 100 so that there's little corruption. See, in very corrupt countries that are under 50 on this index, it's hard to do any self-actualization work there. It's hard to grow. It's hard to start a business.